you're the first person that I've interviewed that I haven't known or met before and talked to before. And so for me, why don't you tell me a little bit about how you got into producing?
Yeah, I was sort of like a PBS nerd from a very young age. So I loved watching Independent Lens and POV, and I was sort of just hooked on the experience of just getting to drop into a different world and really get to experience what others are experiencing. And a lot of the stuff that I saw on those programs was, things about history or things around the world that I'd never learned in school. And so I quickly realized that a platform like that is like super powerful. And I just, from a very early age, have always dreamt of getting to make documentaries like that.
Wow, I like that answer. No, because you don't. That's one of the beauties about film is just to get to experience other people and other lives that you've never seen before.
Absolutely, yeah.
What was your first project as the other producers have been saying, like capital P producer?
Capital P producer. This project now that I have at South by running with BETO is my first feature project that I'm one of the full-fledged producers on.
Mm-hmm. And so how did that start? It's interesting. There's kind of a boom in political documentaries right now. And, obviously the ones we know of are the ones that are hitting in that political figure is in office or is in the spotlight. But you can't time that out when you're getting started. So, where was the entry point for that film?
Yeah, so the director of our film, David Modigliani, actually met Beto when their Sandlot baseball teams played against one another. They had a little quick chat at first base during the game when he was trying to get him out. And I think he realized during the seventh inning, Beto stepped onto a hay bale and spoke to the teams, and they all realized, like, we have no idea who this guy is. We've never heard of him before, but there's something really special about him.
When was that?
So that was, I think, early 2017 that they met originally. Yeah. The world didn't know who he was back then. We knew he was running for Senate, and that interested us. All the unorthodox aspects of his campaign, not accepting any PAC money, the radical transparency with which he was running, always holding these like extremely public town halls, no vetting of the people, questions, going to super red parts of Texas that Democrats hadn't visited in decades. We heard that again and again. Like, you're the only I've been voting for Democrats my whole life, and you're the first person who's come to my community. So there were all these things about him that interested us. We obviously had no idea, will he win? Will he lose? Will anyone outside of Texas progressives learn who he is? And obviously, in the meantime, he grew to become this, national political sensation. We're very grateful to be able to follow that.
When did you get involved in the process?
So I got involved very early on when they were essentially after the first shoot. David was looking for someone to kind of run all the field teams and hire, the editors and just kind of get this project started. We wanted to be able to show it shortly after the election. And so we sort of came up with pretty unorthodox, in our own ways, how to get that done in time. So one of the things that I had done for the very first time on this project that I really wish I'll have the luxury of doing again is we started our editing team about halfway through production, and they became like a key part of the creative process behind it. We filmed over 700 hours of footage, filmed for 12 months, but I think because we had the editors involved at that process, watching the footage, helping us to sculpt those storylines, we were able to kind of be more focused and efficient than you usually can with a project of that scale.
No, it's interesting. We've had some producers talk about it, and I've only made one documentary, and we did the same thing. We were on a timeline as well, not a political film, but there was a particular timeline. But even in fiction films, to bring your editor on in an earlier stage, because they really, their brain is thinking in a different way. And so, to have an editor on a fiction film on set with you is considered a luxury, but really it should be part of the storytelling process. And they are, as much of a collaborator as the producer and the cinematographer in helping shape the story. And so outside of timeline, they're helping you figure out, well, maybe if you had this and this, even within 700 hours of footage. That's what, the good editors can do that. So it's great that you had that really more by necessity for timeline, but probably better for the story in the end.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What was the premiere like? I read about it, but why don't you tell us about it?
It was magical. Our premiere was Saturday, March 9th, and I'm still kind of trying to process it. We premiered at the Paramount, and it was just electric. We had seen it, I was doing all the clearance for it, so I watched it probably like 50 times on my laptop, and we had done one QC screening on the big screen just to test all the technical stuff. But to finally watch it in a packed room and hear all the laughs and see all the tears as we all relived last November, it was very magical. And Beto and his entire team came up from El Paso and DC to join us, and they were so proud of us, so proud of the film, and that means a lot. They're the people who know most of all, like, what that experience was like, and if they felt like we were able to capture the moment, capture the movement, and give the story justice, that really meant a lot.
So one of the things I want to talk about in looking at your IMDb page for the movie, I counted 32 producers, including all of them: co-producer, associate producer, exec producer, producer. How did you manage that? We'll just start with that. What was the makeup of that? And not each individual person, but how does that grow? How do you manage that as someone who was there at the very beginning and wanting to keep a very strong vision for your film with so many people, I'm assuming, having interests and opinions and good or bad? Like, it's just a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah. I think on certain projects that can be challenging. I'm sure you and I both have experienced projects like that. With Running with Beto, it was so different. Everyone was so supportive, so in line with David, the director's vision. So many of those people listed are executive producers who signed on to help us finance the film and to be part of, our family making this early on, before it was, a very easy sell. I think if we were to go to someone now and say, we have this documentary with Beto, it would be far easier. Back then, I think it really takes trust and understanding the mission of the team, the core team involved. And all of those people were so supportive. They all came into town for the premiere, and we really see them as being part of the team, just like the people who edited it, the people who came out on the road to film with us. So all of those producers are, bring value in different ways. What does the producer role, or that produced by credit, what does that mean to you? I think it's bringing all of the pieces together. Being the conduit for all of these talented, amazing people who have their area, and making sure everyone has what they need and is in touch with the right people at the right times, and all of those details, so that the vision can be carried through. Knowing our trajectory and seeing what happened with Beto, and that, like you just said, it's really hard to believe in the film. Now everybody would, of course, and I think we've all been in those scenarios where I always say, like, the producer's job is to prove people wrong, and that, you were involved with something that was very local at the time, but then blew up. What were there plans for it regardless of that happening? Like, how did you guys talk internally about what, I just watched Knock Down the House, well, what if he doesn't win? Or what if, he doesn't hit in this way? You saw potential in him, right, which allowed you to see potential in a film. But what were those conversations, and what would you have done with the film if that, he hadn't blown up and the outcome of the election was still the same, but he wasn't that guy? That's a great question. It was the question of whether he would win or whether he would lose, and what would each of those outcomes mean for us and for the film. It was definitely in the forefront of our minds. There are so many political documentaries where the character does lose, and it's still, with some of our favorite films, Street Fight, Mitt. I think the real story for us was the unorthodox way that Beto is running this campaign and the humanity behind it. We're in one of the most divisive ages of politics ever, it seems. And if we're able to bring someone who would turn off Republican voters with his policies, but show why he's doing this, like that he really cares about all Texans. What is his family's experience through a grueling race like this all over Texas, area bigger than France? Things like that I think can cut across those divides that we have right now. And I think that's something that a story you can tell regardless of the outcome.
Yeah. And speaking about Texas, you live here in Texas. I'm based in Detroit. We've talked to a few producers. We had a producer yesterday from Seattle, and I think it's becoming so much easier for artists to work anywhere, which is lovely. And so for you, is there pros and cons of being an Austin-based producer? Is this where you want to stay? Do you want to tell specific local stories, or kind of what is your rooting in the community as a filmmaker?
This is the midlife crisis question. Where am I? What am I doing?
No, I mean, I was in LA for 12 years and moved back home 4 years ago. I shifted, back the other way, and I had my own reasons, but I think to me it offers more unique storytelling, but it also for me is very particular about my connection to audience is much different not being in LA or New York. And I've seen how that's really benefited my work. And so I see it as a positive, but I'm just curious for you. What is that for you being here?
I mean, I think Austin is a really special place. And I've talked to people who are based in LA, based in New York, other places. And there's a sort of collaborative feeling here in the community that I think doesn't exist in other places. It seems to just come natural to us here. There's a lot of love, a lot of support. We don't view success in film as a finite resource. We're happy when somebody here makes it, when they, a project of theirs really gets out there. And I think that might just be a Texan thing, might be a Southern thing, but that's what really has kept me here. Obviously, we are a smaller market than some other places. A lot of the work here is Texas storytelling, but again, I think that gets to how can we tell stories that feel relevant to more than just your normal documentary loving audience. And I think this state is really ripe with stories like that.
Yeah, and I think for me, filmmakers who create their work outside of LA, New York, I say to a lot of emerging filmmakers, you're making your movies for audiences, not for industry. And when you are in the city and in the industry every single day, it's very easy to lose sight of that. And so to me, it creates better work. So stay, or just go somewhere else that's not New York or LA. Yeah. But speaking of, so something we have in common is I read that you have coordinated part of the Austin Film Society statewide grant programming, and I have worked for Sundance and Film Independent, and have had years where I read up to 1,000 different applications, and I'd love to hear. I have my own thoughts on tips for filmmakers when they're writing grants. I'm first curious how much of, if you're able to say, your film was grant supported, and then in you being someone who's read so many applications for grants, what advice do you have for filmmakers? They're not easy to write, and when you're on the receiving end reading so many, they all start to blur together. I think filmmakers forget that. People are saying, post-Trump era, now more than ever, there's these phrases that just get used in every application that they're not aware of. So what have you seen?
Yeah, I think the grant applications that stand out when you are just reading through hundreds and hundreds of them are the ones where you really feel the heart of the filmmaker, where you feel their vision and their commitment, and where they have some into the story. Because there's, a lot of really well-intentioned filmmakers who, see some issue and they want to kind of parachute in and tell that story. And while that's so commendable, I think having someone who can really understand that on a different level, or make, real inroads with the community that understands those issues and has those experiences, I feel like those are the projects that tend to be successes.
This was your first feature documentary, correct? Mm-hmm. So now looking back in hindsight, what do you wish somebody would have told you before you started?
I think I think people did tell me this, but the scale of it was something I wasn't prepared for. And part of that was just the subject matter itself. Learning that the only people that work longer days than production are politicians. Learning that they don't stop for meal breaks. They go 18 hours a day. And trying to sort of get our production to mirror that as closely as possible without risks to health or mental health. Yeah. In terms of just how to get things out there, there's so many amazing projects that come out every year. And I think it's just sort of like the phenomenon of social media. There's just so much constantly coming. How do you get people to pay attention? And I think it just comes down to creative thinking, just like storytelling does. There's a home for every film. There's an audience for every film. And I think getting out there and talking to people about it. One thing I have noticed is sometimes producers get very like meek and quiet when people ask about their project. And that's your chance to really sell it. And so you have to honestly believe in it yourself and be able to transfer that sort of enthusiasm and excitement to somebody else. And I'd say there's always reasons why, someone would say no, a funder, distributor, festival, and you can't take that personally. You have to just keep looking for the home for your film, the home that it deserves.
What does success mean to you?
I think to me, success means getting to work with a team that inspires you, that drives you to be better at your job, and getting to share a story that you feel has impacted you. So after the 2016 presidential election, I think like many of us, I sort of went into a deep, dark, depressive period. And BETO for me really brought me back to a place of hope and feeling like it is worth it to be involved and, wanting to be part of that movement. And we saw people across the state just having that same experience I had. And so being able to be part of the team to share that with the world, that's a literal dream job for me.